Welcome back, everyone, to Tech Leaders Unplugged. I'm your host, Tullio Siragusa. Today, I am joined by Rameshwar Balanagu.
You got it right.
Being with us today. Yeah, thank you. We're talking about a very interesting topic today. We're talking about the circular economy and enterprise architecture, and we're looking to answer this question, need of the hour for all generations. This is going to be a very educational show. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to look forward to it mostly because I'm going to learn a lot myself. So hopefully those of you watching will also get some insights from this. But before we get started, let's get to know our guest a little bit. Ramesh, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you. Looking forward to speaking with you today.
Hey, Tullio. Good talking to you, and thanks for inviting me on this Tech Leaders Unplugged. Hello, audience. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, depends on where you are on the geo of the earth. A little bit about me, not too much rambling. I have 20 plus years of experience in the IT field. I've managed several teams. I've recently left Avaya as the head of enterprise architecture. That is where I started developing a penchant or kind of inclination of sustainability. Actually, this is a buzzword that's being used, but the concept of lean has been there since the era of human civilization has begun. I have left Avaya around 2 months back, and I've joined this fabulous growing company called Intangles.ai. It's a digital twin and AI company. Simply put, it's improving the vehicle life and reducing carbon footprint. As we speak, we'll talk about the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. This company helps reduce the carbon footprint significantly using AI. And that's what made me get interested with the company and join them as their chief digital officer.
Great. Thank you for being with us, Ramesh. Today, we're talking about understanding the pivotal role of enterprise architecture as in facilitating the circular economy. So before we get started down this path, I think it's fair. Maybe some people don't know what that means. What is the circular economy? What is the linear economy in comparison? And I found this is an interesting explanation, and perhaps you can chime in on this. It says that the circular economy is an economic model that aims to minimize waste and maximize resource efficiency by designing products and systems for longevity, reusability, and recycling, ultimately reducing environmental impact and fostering sustainability. So, in retrospect, what is the linear economy? The opposite?
Yes. Let's make it simplified. What's the difference between circular, linear, and then what's the relation between sustainable? You know, um, Mother Nature, has always created a circular economy. And when I mean by that, it has created a food chain where, the plants are consumed by the herbivores are consumed by carnivores, and the bigger ones. And then guess what? What happens? They all die, and then they go back to the soil. The nutrients are replenished and refilled, and the cycle continues. This is a very simple way where whatever is produced from nature or Mother Earth gets back to Earth in a new form. So the energy is never lost. It's only transferred from one state to another. Somewhere down the line, Mother Nature had an aberration and created new species called humankind. Okay, so the humankind, what it did is, thanks to Industrial Revolution 1.0, 2.0, we made our lives better. What we did is we took the raw materials, we consumed, we manufactured new products. Now these products, what did they do after we kind of used them there, where they've gone with their end of life? We sent them to the landfill for dump and dump and dump. And then we also had greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases, I don't know if you've seen, Earth is warming up than ever before. The Arctic Oceans and the Antarctic Ocean glaciers are melting. I think the South Asia, there's a record heat coming. People are saying in Canada, or not in Canada, in California, it's extremely hot. And then suddenly, you could see the skeletons near the dams and whatnot. 50 years back, corpses, boats, what were not found. And then months later, you see a gush of rainfall, surge of snowfall. Earth is moving at a cataclysmic rate. This is what linear is. You are consuming it and not recycling it. So recycling is just one part of it. So forget the technology of recycle reuse. Basically, if we can follow Mother Earth, the food chain process, that is circular economy.
All right. So we basically, in one word, it's about sustainability, right? I mean,
And you hit the point.
it's all about sustainability. So
Exactly.
let's see the connection between this and technology. That's really what we're wanting to talk about today. And
Yeah.
there's 5 key challenges as I was researching this related to enabling the circular economy. We're probably not going to get to all 5 of them, but let's start with the first one and see what we can discover here. The key challenge to sustainability is to actually design for a life cycle management process. And so the first question I have for you, I'd love to get your input, is how can enterprise architecture promote sustainability in their design and also promote life cycle management, enabling organizations to basically create products and services that minimize waste, promote reusability, and maximize resources efficiency? So, what can companies do to make this possible?
So enterprise architecture is all about optimizing, simplifying, and automating. Very simple. It's all that's how you do that. And the way you do that is there is waste across the business and in terms of what we call as a value chain. And there is waste through the systems because too many systems there is a waste through your business process, there's a waste through your data. you know we are in the 21st century, and even still to date we still struggle with data quality issue. We don't get a timely report with our data. We don't even know how effective our systems are. We don't even know how effective our processes are. So this is where enterprise architecture comes. Long ago, Toyota introduced the concept of lean, TQM, and Kanban and Kaizen. It's very simple. Understand your value chain, reduce reduce waste, identify bottlenecks, streamline the process. So we've always had this lean concept, but we're just putting a sustainable angle on it, making it more glamorous. But the goal of enterprise architect or the nirvana is, identify the bottlenecks, both across the value stream, supporting your customer, the journey that he is going through. If instead of going through 100 clicks, maybe you just make it 25 clicks or 50 clicks. What is happening is it's actually reducing the number of system interactions, thereby the carbon footprint is actually being reduced. So we never put a carbon angle or a sustainable angle. If we can improve the journey and reduce the time to get to a point, that actually accelerates your sustainable angle. And this is what every EA wants to do. Our goal as an EA is, guess what? We want to reduce the number of systems, which reduces the carbon footprint because you will have less cooling from your data centers, which is consuming more carbon. People now, we are dumping solar, data centers into the sea so that they are cool. But I am not 100% sure is that having a flora and a fauna effect in the ocean. I've been doing a lot of Google research on it. The thing is, if you put this massive data centers into the ocean, what kind of a heating impact it is causing, I don't know. But all it is the less, or if you can understand the journey and put some design thinking across your customer, you definitely have a chance to become lean and improve your carbon reduction footprint as well.
Very interesting. You're speaking my language, speaking about design thinking. So, besides a context shift in how we think about sustainability, and I love the example you gave earlier in terms of how nature works. It's an interdependent model. It's not a codependent model. It's one that's serving itself constantly. There's a lot of lessons we can learn about leadership and how to be good humans from that too. But let's, going back to the beginning, I would say, I don't know if you would agree with this, probably the supply chain is contributing to continuing this linear economy, right? This linear environment. So how can supply chain, for example, be optimized so that the enterprise architecture can support a circular principles. For example, by facilitating tracking, sharing, analysis of data throughout the entire value chain. So, what can we do around the supply chain that often is contributing to the problem in creating a supply chain environment that supports this circular economy?
Uh, you know, I talked about nature creating a bad gene called human, but also nature also made the human with a good gene called intelligence. Our level of intelligence and our penchant to evolve with the technology has been at the forefront. This is what excites us as human beings to be better people. In the past, logistics and supply chain was a nightmare. Yeah, but now thanks to the technology, there are concepts like digital twin and AI, which actually help you understand your system end to end. When you talk of supply chain, I will correlate it to a scope three emissions. And what I mean by scope three is it's an indirect way where you and your partner or you and your customer are interacting. In the past, we did not have technology where we did not have any visibility of what was happening. Let's say you wanted to buy an apple, very simple example. All you had to do was go to the grocery store and buy that apple, but you don't know from where it came, how much of carbon was it consumed. There is let's not just talk of carbon, let's talk of sustainability. Was there any child labor used? Or it could be something like that. But now what happens is with the help of technology, we'll take this example of AI and just say supply chain and ERP systems. You know your system well when an order has been placed, but you don't know where the apple has been procured. Now, by integrating the technology their with their platforms using open collaboration tools, you get this lineage. You can take this lineage and say, you know what, this orange or apple was occurred from Ghana or India or somewhere else. You could stamp that into the blockchain, and then you have the visibility that this. Everybody is talking of circular economy, sustainability, but guys, let's understand, it is an evolution, not a revolution. Evolution takes time. We can't jump off where we are and say, you know what, from today, now I've heard a buzzword called regenerative thinking, sustainable thinking, all new buzzwords. It takes time. The concept of design thinking itself, we are still evolving to it. So what we can get is step one, as we collaborate, we get more transparency using open technologies. You have all this. And then from there, remember this famous statement, what cannot be measured cannot be managed. The first thing what you do is when you have this open collaboration and have the lineage, you at least know where the apple is coming from, and if there's a carbon footprint, you can record it in the blockchain. So technology is coming to the rescue of humans to improve and foster supply chain. Again, this is where your scope 3 falls in. So once we baseline, where it is going, where the carbon footprint is coming, we can take a sustainable angle. Maybe we can see how the apple could be made better, or how we could eliminate child labor. Sustainability is not about carbon footprint, it's about the overall wellness of planet Earth.
You said a few things I want to dig into a little bit. Number one, obviously, knowing what to measure is the first step, right? And along those lines, you talked about an apple, right? When we go to a grocery store, we adopted this label that tells us what's in the product.
Correct.
Right? And what it's made of. It sounds as though perhaps we need to adopt something similar that speaks to what processes were followed to develop a product. It doesn't necessarily have to be food, in terms of its sustainability, how much carbon footprint it took, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So what policies need to be in place? Because ultimately this is going to be, just like the FDA controls certain policies and the food, in terms of labels, for example, what policies and regulations need to be in place to support this kind of transparency? Because ultimately, the more we know, the better choices we make, right? It's like we don't know what to measure because we don't have access to the information. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think the industry is moving on it. I think GRI 306, which if I'm not wrong, is a regulatory act that is coming up and saying to assess the waste and the materiality impact of, if you had produced an apple, what is the amount of wastage that's happening. Now today, if you see on an apple today, all you see is a barcode. The barcode is telling you the price of it. That's it. And it gives you the SKU number, and then based on the SKU, when you scan it, you get the barcode, the price of it. Perhaps there could be a little bit more, like an additional barcode or something that can tell you the origins of it and what kind of a controls were applied. Now, this is an education. Since you asked me this question, and I'm just telling it. uh, I think, not the apple but the packaging could definitely tell. So for example, today in the pharma industries, what they do is they send the lot number and the batch number and the expiration date, because they need to know from which company it has come, which batch. Let's say, the drug, the medicine had a infection or a bacterial infection, whatnot. Then same thing with an apple, they do a recall. When you do a recall, you know from which company it has come and which batch and what expiry. Perhaps the same technology could be expanded and saying, what, this we followed, it emitted so much amount of carbon dioxide, and then this was the protocol, or these were the standards coming. Since you touch this standards protocol, standards take time. I think both Europe and US have today around 14 standards on greenhouse global gas emissions. One of the biggest being the Sustainability Account Standard Board. None of these are mandatory. So when you talk of finance, you have FASB, which is mandatory, where you do your 10K and 10Q. Unless there's a mandate, now companies are being forced, and they're using this as a CSR. Sadly, even the big companies like Goldman Sachs and all use the carbon wash to offset their losses and actually show sustainable angle, but they were sued by the public attorneys and whatnot, saying, you're doing a carbon wash. The government should make it a mandate of what and how to report it. There is a GRI, there is SASB, Europe is following its norms, US is following its norms. I've been looking at India, India is trying to follow its norms. There's not one side. If you take that example, vehicles have a standard, like Europe has Euro 6. India is also having its Bharat norms, which are very similar to Europe. So if you start enforcing these kind of standards, where you say what is the permissible limit for your vehicle, what kind of pollution, then the companies are forced to mandate. The same thing should occur to the enterprises. And this is where enterprise architects can actually take a leapfrog, because enterprise architects, we've been dealing with privacy for a long time, be it with the California law or the GDPR or whatnot. This is one more standard as a part of good governance. If the standards are made, enterprise architects will then take a holistic view, which is what they are, and say, as a part of good governance, these are the practices we have to follow. It's a long answer to you.
Yeah, that we have someone watching the show on LinkedIn, David Gonzalez. He says he's working on and co-authoring the draft for the IEEE P7800 guideline standards that contributes to sustainability for enterprise. I think you guys should definitely connect after the show.
Sure.
You said something interesting, and we've seen this across a number of areas in our lives, where you either voluntarily move forward to do what's right, or you're forced to do it because compliance and regulatory demands it. Hopefully, we're taking the right steps forward without the necessary requirements, but it sounds to me that those regulatory requirements are needed. Let's continue talking a little bit about, speaking of being responsible as a business, the business model, it has to be a much more innovative business model. I think you would agree. Now, how can organization leverage enterprise architecture, for example, to identify and implement new business models that align with the circular economy? What are some of the tips you would give in terms of things like product as a service, sharing economy, and waste to resource models? What are some good best practices for those organizations who are not waiting for regulatory compliance, who just want to take the right step forward and adopt the right models?
Right. Again, this is technology has been driving our consumer behavior. There are two things, which is the pre-COVID and the COVID. We'll talk about that. Let's talk of the Netflixes. How did we get in the past? they came and they used to we used to go to the Blockbuster was ousted because they couldn't offer like how Netflix offered, sent a CD to your mail. That was like an aha moment, right? So we had a change, and then Netflix then went into the cloud and said, "Listen, forget all the DVDs coming and shipping and whatnot. Just go to the cloud." And then this ushered a new movement, basically a subscription movement. Same thing happened to enterprises. You no longer need to buy this multi-million dollar ERPs or platforms. If you have just $30-40, buy it as a SaaS. So what SaaS did is brought a subscription economy. So enterprise architecture then shifted its whole model of how we recognize our revenue, how we recognize our experiences in a different way that we were not used. So what I'm saying is, the subscription economy actually accelerated how EA has to go from a traditional linear economy into subscription, because you only pay for what you use, and then 3 years down the line, 2 years down the line, whatever, you just shove it off, either you move it. So enterprise architecture has two things: adaptability, because they have to make sure the systems are ready to, today we had X tool, tomorrow we have Y tool. They need to make sure no matter what it is, the basic functionality is there. So what subscription economy gave is actually what you said, as a product as a service. So far, we have been an ownership economy. That means we bought a home, we bought a car, we used it for a life, or we rented out. There, we don't have an option or an incentive to recycle. All we are doing is a landfill. If the car goes for a trash, we just dump it out, and then it comes into scrap or garbage, or we don't know what happens post. The moment we move into the subscription economy or rental economy, what I call, whereas there is no concept, again, this is a concept where there's no concept of ownership. The product that you purchase has a shelf life, and then the product goes back to the manufacturer, because then the chances of that being recycled and being reused are far effective than we dumping into a landfill. So I think, this is where the economy, my view is, it should go from an ownership economy to a rental economy, and part of this is product as a service. This is between pre-COVID to post-COVID. Now, post-COVID, what has happened is Gen Z is been creating new segments. You would have seen, I'll put an irony. Off late, Forbes 30 under 30 is all kids, but unfortunately, many of these have turned out to be Ponzi's and zombies. Okay, we'll leave it over there. But what is happening is they have ushered new experiences, new enterprises. The traditional mindset of how an experience has to be versus a new experience which Gen Z is defining is very different. So they are creating ways or new business models which we couldn't think. So enterprise architecture has to be at the edge of understanding what new business models are coming. And Gen Z particularly is looking at sustainability. Is this company diversified? Is this company supporting nature? How does it support from a remote to hybrid? You'll be surprised that in the scope 3, as a part of downstream, commuting is also contributing to the pollution, to the sustainability. So when COVID came, we said everybody work from home, and now we are saying come back, come back, come back. So instead of doing a public commute, we are now buying. Of course, there is Teslas and whatnot coming, but we are again accelerating transportation on the road, which is actually increasing the scope 3. So when you start shifting between, we didn't call them scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, but as you start shifting, enterprise architecture is in a flux mode of how to adapt. We used to plan for 3 to 5 years. Now, when anybody asks me, Ramesh, how do you do road mapping? I say we should not do more than 1 year, because the industry dynamics are so dynamic. You cannot think beyond 1 year. And if you're thinking of a North Star of 3 years, this is how we will be, forget that.
Yeah, more like 6 months.
Exactly.
So we're out of time, but you said something interesting about the lease versus ownership, and that's been highly politicized as well, right? There's a big divide in terms of conversations around that, and maybe it's not about ownership versus leasing as it is shared ownership. Because there's still,
maybe.
Because the argument is there's still someone who owns it, but I don't own it, I have to rent it. Well, what if we just share the ownership? Maybe that's the right model. Who knows?
Airbnb. Airbnb is a classic example, right?
Well, there's still someone who owns the unit, right? So maybe there's some model that we haven't talked
A
about yet. We'll
hybrid
see.
model.
Some hybrid model, exactly. But clearly, there needs to be a lot more collaboration on this. That's the thing that's come out, at least in
Correct.
talking with you, is that more collaboration needs to happen, more conversations need to happen, and more open dialogue to create a truly sustainable circular
Julio,
economy.
there's a lot of background noise. I don't know from where.
It's me. It's me. There's noise in the background. We're at the end, so I appreciate you joining me today, Ramesh. Just stay with me as we go off the air in a second. Thanks for being with us. We've got some great shows coming up shortly. Stay tuned every day at 9:30 a.m. We will be filling up the roster on the show. We've just gotten started. We've got Ravi Shankar coming up, who's Enterprise CTO of Microsoft, Gary Sorrentino, CIO at Zoom, Daryl Bracken, CEO of Logitech, and Gil Rosen, who's the CMO at MDocs. Those are some of our upcoming guests. We've got many more scheduled, so stay tuned, 9:30 a.m. every day of the week. And thanks for being with us. Enjoy your weekend, and stay with me as we come to the end. Take care, everybody.